I'd like to talk today about a groundbreaking book, The Evolution of Beauty. The author makes a radical claim. The Darwinists were wrong. They thought that survival of the fittest was the only explanation for evolution. No. Now the odd thing is that Darwin himself got it right. It was his followers that forgot what he said. In his second book, The Descent of Man, he had two parts. The first part followed everything that was known at that point in time, the 1870s, about how monkeys had evolved into apes, had evolved into human beings. It was a pretty good story. Now the second part of the book is entitled Sexual Selection. Darwin goes through the animal kingdom, pointing out how animals are selected not for survival, but for what works as far as mating goes. Now, part of this is obvious. Among mammals, the males with big horns fight with each other for access to the females. They may get killed in the process. But there's also sexual selection by females. And this is the premise of this book. This is based on beauty. Now the classical example of this is the peacock. The peacock's huge tail feathers have no survival benefit whatsoever. They must slow the bird down as he works through the forest. Doesn't help him escape predators or get food, but the peahens love it. So the male with the biggest feathers is the male who gets to mate with the peahens, and he leaves sons with even bigger feathers. The author, Richard Prum, points out a couple of other examples of this. The bowerbirds in Australia make elaborate tunnels of love out of woven vines. They decorate them with all sorts of colorful stones, and they do an amazingly seductive dance to try to get the female in the mood. And if she's in the mood, he leaves more of his kind. It has no survival value whatsoever. An even more extreme example is the club-winged mannequin. Now, every bird in the bird kingdom has long, skinny, hollow bones in their wings to support more feathers to keep them in the air. Except this guy. He has a solid wing bone. What good is that? Well, it turns out that by waving it really quickly, it makes music. And the female birds love it. So this guy has sacrificed his ability to fly to some extent for love. And it works. There are more mannequins. So Darwin was right, the Darwinists were wrong, and this leads to some interesting observations. If we don't evolve for survival of the fittest, we may not be the fittest, and these guys may die out. In fact, that's happened. The Irish elk got horns so big that it could barely move its head, it appears, and they died out, all in the quest for impressing the females. Okay, so much for birds and mammals. What about people? Sexual selection seems to work among us. I mean, how else do you explain why we lost all of our hair? Except on our head, where it's long and useless, except kind of beautiful. How else do you explain the evolution of blondes and blue eyes? Not evolutionarily terribly advantageous. More than that, some of our cultural traits such as singing. Singing does nothing to catch antelope or keep the lions away, but women like it, and men like it too. And language may have got its start that way. How else do you explain how we started to speak? Now I'd like to go off on a bit of a tangent of my own, looking at human evolution. Up until 10,000 years ago, we lived in small tribes of hunter-gatherers. And there was one thing that mattered, which was to have a lot of children because you were involved in a lot of wars with other hunter-gatherers and you lost children to disease. The chief advantage that humans had over other apes was that the males, helped in raising the children. So female selection, picking the best male for taking care of the children, was a big deal. More than that, marriage wasn't a big thing among hunter-gatherers, still isn't in Brazil or Africa, and the women and the men kind of paired up as they wanted, ladies' choice, because what they needed was babies. Didn't matter whose, because everybody was related. Now that changed with the advent of agriculture. All of a sudden men had enough property to pass on to their sons. So the question of who their sons were became important. They started controlling who married whom. The dreaded patriarchy. And so it went for 10,000 years. 10,000 years of very rapid evolution. We got much more intelligent. We learned to live in cities. We learned how to get along with each other. Many, many things we developed when the men were in charge. But this started to end with the industrial age a couple hundred years ago. Women started working away from home. Women started being independent of men. And as men invented more things to help the women, such as cars, sewing machines, and so on, women have become even more independent, to the point that they really don't need men much at all today. So today, it would be laughable if a father suggested to his daughter who she should marry, and the women will marry if they want, will have children if they want, will have lesbian affairs if they want, and men don't have a whole lot to say about it. This is where evolution has taken us. And Prum, the author of this book, goes there. He says that female choice has made men, male humans, much less different from the female humans than, say, the male apes and the female apes. We don't have the long teeth to bite and scare away other males. We're not so aggressive and brutal, we don't control harems. We're lucky if we get one. Woman, that is. So men have evolved to be much more like women, much more docile. Human evolution is very fast. And we become much more docile just over this couple hundred years. So he says that this accounts, to some degree, for the evolution of feminism. Women are in charge, women are respected, and also for homosexuality. Because the men have become much more feminine, much more comfortable with their feminine side, and they seem to like each other. More than that, since women have their own way, hypergamy, that is the woman's ability to mate with the most attractive man, the kind of the Peacock model, has come into fashion. Well, this worked in the age of polygamy, when an alpha male could have a whole run of females, but women also want to insist on monogamy. So there are a lot of men who don't have much other choice. So they, I think, may be inclined to become homosexual on account of that. Whatever. This is the most cogent explanation I've read so far for how feminism and homosexuality came about. Now, mind you, going back to Darwin's point, it may be counter-evolutionary, it may lead to our extinction, but this is at least an explanation of how we may have gotten where we are. I recommend that you take a look at my rather extensive review on Amazon, The Evolution of Beauty. It'll give you something to talk about at our after parties, something to talk about with your friends. And please, when you read my review, say it was helpful. Madam Toastmaster.